Well, it's grand final time. We've made it after a couple of weeks of intense competition between what ended up being sort of 6.5 participating nations in this tournament. We've whittled it down to the remaining two. The Solomon Islands will play New Zealand for the grand prize of a place in the Inter-Confederational Play Off. Turned out it was the two highest ranking teams that got there. I think everyone expected New Zealand, but Solomon Islands battled hard in the semi-final against Papua New Guinea, beating them 3-2 in the end to get through to that grand final. Ryan, firstly, what do you make of that semi-final against PNG, and how do you rate the Solomon Islands?
Great questions, my friend. Firstly, this is the first preview that I've actually joined you on for this tournament, so I think it's great to be here, mate. It's great to be here, and a quick line on your superb coverage and ridiculously accurate preview so far. So I will try not to be kind of the bad luck for just how your previews have been bang on throughout this kind of qualification. What do I make of the Solomon Islands? Well, as we spoke about in the live stream, when we watched that PNG Solomon Islands game, we spoke about the first time that we'd watched this side when they had that pre-tournament friendly against the Queensland Lions, and they draw the game. Oh, what was that game, Tom? 3, or did they win? 3.
Yeah. Wasn't it 4-2 in the end?
4-2. That was it. And we were ridiculously impressed, weren't we, with their technical ability, their pace, the intricacy, the way they rotate the ball from left to right, the one-touch passing where they'll drop it into a centre-forward's feet, bounce it off, and there'll be third and fourth men runners. They are very, very impressive, technically gifted, and rapid. That game against PNG, they showed those skills all over again in what was a frantic, frenetic, brilliant game that we thoroughly enjoyed live streaming. And they're a side that will, as you said, mate, this is the two best sides, or the two best ranked sides in Oceania. The two best ranked sides. It probably is the two best sides that are meeting in this final. And of all the teams that could cause New Zealand some trouble, I think the Solomon Islands are well suited for it, mate. What about yourself, and how do you see them against New Zealand?
Well, it's an interesting one. In the preview for the PNG game, I said I think the Solomon Islands will win. But I think that was always more of a reflection on the lack of clinicality that I saw from PNG throughout the tournament. And I thought that whilst PNG's defence was the best of the rest, excluding New Zealand, I still thought that the Solomon Islands were still defensively. They're a good team defensively. They don't set the world alight. But Iyengary's a good defender. Kalu's a good defender. They got in down the other side quite a few times against Prince. But I think that was partly down to the performance of Kepo, who played very well for PNG in that game.
Yeah, he was good.
In terms of Marshall and Gunemba and Semi, they did pretty well. They did pretty well for most of the game. And they've got the attacking ability with basically the 5 that they play up front to cause any side problems. And they've scored 3 now in back-to-back games, which is quite a big thing. They've won so far at this tournament. They beat the Cook Islands 2-0, fair enough. And then against the two sides that have attacked them a little bit more, they've put 3 past both. And we've seen fantastic counter-attack goals, particularly from number 20, Rafa Lae'i, on the wing as well, just 19 years old. I think that they're a very good attacking side and a very, very exciting side. But one thing from their point of view that concerned me ahead of the final is they were 3-1 up against Papua New Guinea, a side who don't really score that many goals. And I don't think they had maybe that same defensive solidity, or just same kind of the footballing mindset to kind of play a bit boring. You're 3-1 up in a semi-final. Just keep 2 or 3 up front that you're going to ping the ball long to. But you don't need to be doing ticky-tack. You don't need to have more of the ball at this stage. You asked the question of PNG. Okay, break us down then. Come on, we're 3-1 up. And they were still attacking. They were still constantly... And you have to credit them for it. They could have had 4 or 5. Some good performances at the back. interestingly, and I'm only going to touch on this very quick, there was actually VAR in that game, and therefore I think that VAR made a few incorrect calls, because I thought there was definitely a couple of penalty shouts. I've seen after there was definitely VAR at that game.
Oh wow, that's absolutely baffling based on some of the things that we were speaking about on that live watch along. That's, I mean, maybe we'll go into that.
Touch on
that. So there's VAR for this final then as well.
So there's definitely VAR for the final. So there's VAR for the semi-finals and the final. So it was the finals stage.
Sure.
Listen, I don't think it'll play as big a part in this game. I think we may see it used because I think it's a grand final. So I think any excuse to sort of whip out VAR on the biggest stage, and they probably will. They just love it, don't they? You know, any excuse to kind of produce a red card or give a penalty, they absolutely will. And it's also good for the offsides, you know, which, because we saw in a few group games that it wasn't quite right. So it will be useful for that. In terms of the final itself, I personally, I'll go first. I personally think that we'll see attacking flair and guile from the Solomon Islands, but I don't think that tactically they've got the ability to park the bus. And I also don't think they should park the bus because they're just not big enough physically to park the bus. They are a very small nation, and New Zealand are a very big nation. Chris Wood would dominate in the air. And they play. I imagine that New Zealand will probably play the three at the back. So it'll be the 3-4-3 system or a variation of it. So Costa Barbarouses on the right will cut in. There'll be an overlapping run from the right back, whoever that may be, or right wing back, should I say. And so they will get opportunities to cross the ball if the Solomon Islands allow them to by parking the bus. And they'll just get dominated by Chris Wood. We saw them come under some threat from Tahiti from that. And the quality of deliveries from New Zealand is just going to be far superior. So I think they should play attacking football. I think they should try and cause an upset by just scoring goals. But for that reason, I do think that we'll see goals in this game, and I think we'll see a New Zealand win.
Really? I was going to say, you've touched on a few things there. When I was looking at this game, sort of pre-coming on this call, and I was thinking, like, where could this game be won and lost? Obviously, we're coming from kind of the angle of sort of Solomon Islands here, aren't we? Because of D&Q and the Channel, and yes, New Zealand aren't a massive sort of footballing nation from a rankings perspective, but in this region they are. They're huge, aren't they? They're, you know, massive favourites for this game, massive favourites for the qualification. So I was kind of when I was kind of looking at where could this game be won and lost, I was kind of looking at it from a Solomon Islands point of view, and I picked out a few things that you've literally just mentioned there. My kind of bullet points, I put Chris Wood versus centre backs. So that's just from general play, as well as, and then my kind of goes on to my next point, set pieces for New Zealand, because they'll have Chris Wood, but they've also got Winston Reid, just to name one. You know, we're talking about huge players here, in stature as well as performance. But yeah, you know, 6'4", 6'3", they're just going to dominate that aerial battle. And with quality deliveries, it's going to be an area that New Zealand will probably want to expose. And then one thing that I jotted down was New Zealand clinicality. Now, we did the live watch along for the Solomon Islands PNG game. We didn't then continue our coverage for the New Zealand Tahiti game. Anyone watching this video will now know that New Zealand won that game 1-0 with a fairly late Liberto Kakachi role. My pronunciation on that might not be correct, so I apologise. And Danny Hay, after the game, basically said that they didn't play great, but he never doubted that he kind of knew that they would win the game. It was just their lack of clinicality that left it slightly squeaky bum for the last 20 until they got the goal. He was never in any doubt that they were going to win the game. And will they have the same mindset for this game? Probably. And it's like, if they are clinical, you know, because they had an abundance of chances against Tahiti and they were constantly pressuring for the breakthrough. If they are clinical, it could sort of spiral into being a comfortable win in my opinion. Just a quick line from you. I'm keen, as someone that's been really sort of engrossed in this tournament, I'd love to know kind of key players for kind of, we know, you know, New Zealand's it's going to be like Chris Wood, isn't it? But from a Solomon Islands point of view, if they stand any chance of doing the spectacular here, who needs to play brilliantly for them, in your opinion, as someone that's been really in and amongst this?
I think that we need to see another performance from Rafa. It's a lot of pressure to put on the 19-year-old shoulders, but he's going to be over the opposite side of the pitch to Winston Reid, which is going to give him the best chance. I think if Mika plays on the left wing, he's going to be up against Winston, which is a good challenge for them both, because it's not game over for Mika, but it also means that Winston Reid is occupied constantly by a good player that he has to think about if they go with this 3 at the back system, which they probably will. So I think that Rafa, with his pace and his power, we saw a goal. He's run onto the end of the ball, headed it over 2 defenders, sprinted past them, taken a touch and popped it in. He's got the ability in his locker, but for me, this game will be kind of won and lost in a few areas for the Solomon Islands. One, if Clayton Lewis plays defensive midfield for New Zealand, he's going to be a tough player to get past for the likes of Alwyn and Atkin. In this game, that they dominated the midfield against PNG. Broadly, you had William Kamasi sitting, and I expect him to almost form a back 5, literally just shield the defence in this game as he did against PNG, and then he just gives it to those 2, and again they kind of link that front 5 together. So I think those 2 will be very important. I think that, as I've already said, Mika, Lea'alafa and Joseph Snawa have got a thankless task in this game. I just think, be a problem. Just ask questions, work great tenacity, but I'm not expecting them to cause too many upsets on Winston Reid, But another key area, fullbacks. The fullbacks for the Solomon Islands who go with the back 4, if they are left exposed 2v1, against a right wing back and a left wing back and the wingers as well, they'll be beaten in 1-2s, and that's where the goals are going to come from. It's deliveries from out wide. I don't expect New Zealand to try and play much through the Solomon Islands. But the difficulty is if Solomon Islands cheat with their wingers and they stay high, which we've seen them do for the counter attacks, they're going to get annihilated by the 1-2s down the wing. They're going to get absolutely annihilated, and balls into that box. Chris Wood, I just can't see tactically New Zealand not winning this one. And also, one thing I'd touch on, listening to a point that you've made there. By the way, as we've said, I very much love every team from this region, but we are slightly leaning towards being Solomon Islands fans for this game. That's not meant disrespectfully to New Zealand, and we do want the Solomon Islands to win because we think it would be an incredible story. But look at New Zealand's 4 games they've played so far, and look at the 2 teams that have attacked them versus the 2 teams that haven't as much. 2 games where they've come up against big physical sides, big stature. They've only won both 1-0. Then against 2 teams that have gone out to attack, and of course New Caledonia scored the only goal against them, they've scored 11 in 2. And that's why I think this game will be lost.
So this is a point that I was going to make actually. Do the Solomons have it in their locker to approach this game the same way that PNG and Tahiti did? And as someone that hasn't been, you've been kind of watching every second of every game here, I was kind of into this, and my kind of approach to that would have been, I don't think they do. I saw you shaking your head there, and you're not convinced either. That's kind of why I am a little bit, as we said, love every nation from this region. We love it. This is just Minnow Nation heaven for like a World Cup qualification campaign. Brilliant. Loved it. Been a great 2 weeks. Love New Zealand, but I'd love to see something spectacular on Wednesday with the Solomon Islands performance. So going to be low-key cheering those guys on. Do I see it happening? I don't see it happening, and it's just because of the quality of New Zealand and the dominance that they kind of have in this region. If I had to put a score on it, I would go 2 or 3-0 New Zealand, mate. And I don't really want that to be too negative. But I just feel that I think the Solomon Islands thrive off a kind of a bit more of a frantic and frenetic game, and I'm not sure I can see it being like that. Hope I'm proven wrong, but that's kind of how I see it going, man.
I'm going to go the same margin but a different scoreline. So I'm actually going to go with 4-1.
Okay.
Because I think I'm mainly just because I want the Solomon Islands to score, and I think their attacking endeavour is. I think they are the best attacking team that aren't New Zealand. But in terms of quite a random statement I'm going to make, I think the Solomon Islands are the second best team in the region, so I think it's the correct final. but a closer final would have been PNG.
Yeah,
I do genuinely believe that.
I know what you mean. They ran them close in that first game, didn't they?
They did, and they can just park the bus. And the Solomon Islands, the footballing culture out there, the futsal and everything, and the coach demands that they play. And I think he's a brilliant coach, Felipe, and they've done so well. And I don't necessarily even think it's a problem that they can't park the bus. I just think you have to accept that, and hopefully they can do something that still they walk away from this game with that bit of pride. And I think scoring a goal, particularly if it's young Rafa, he'll be signing himself a contract for certainly a New Zealand club, maybe a bigger club, if he scores in this final, because he's probably already done enough at just 19 years old to get a contract abroad. But I do think that it will be something around a similar sort of margin, maybe a 3-0 or 4-1. But listen, we hope that we're wrong with this one. As ever, we just want a good competitive game. If you're from the Solomon Islands or any other nation in that region, drop a comment below on this video. What do you think the scoreline's going to be? Who do you think are going to? What players do you think are going to be key for this fixture? We are doing a live watch along, whether it is both of us or just me. We will be doing a live watch along, so make sure you check that out. We got loads of people on for the semi-final, which was awesome. It was a great experience. So we want to do that again. We want a great game. Good luck to both sides, particularly the Solomon Islands, and from us, as ever, we'll see you next time.